As I have done for our previous two list shows, no goofing around on this one. Bob, 20 minutes from now, hit the bricks. Our special co-hosts are Steve Gennarelli and John McAdam from Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. And for the third time, we're doing a list show, the top 50 tag teams of the 1980s. Will you agree? Is there someone we left out? Take a listen and find out on this special edition of The Outdated Wrestling Hour. Hello, everybody. It's Bob Smith, the old PWI guy, and this is the Outdated Wrestling Hour, the top 50 tag teams of the 1980s, featuring Steve Gennarelli and John McAdam of Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam on the Arcadian Vanguard podcast network. In any event, we're glad to have them back, and we're glad to have you back. We're going to get right to this, so we're going to change our format a little bit. Bear with us for about 2 minutes. We're going to talk about the WrestleCopia podcast network, and then we're going to bring on Joe Puccio, and after that, well, here comes the list. Little food for thought here. Get your thinking caps on and take a trip with us back to the 1980s, the expansion years, the Joe McHugh years, the NWA years, the AWA years. A lot going on here. Memphis, you name it, they're all included on our list. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You know what to get out of the fridge by now. It's your one-stop shop. Great wrestling. WrestleCopia.com, where you'll find an armload of great wrestling podcasts. Some are weekly, some are not. All of them are great. Ray Russell brings WrestleCopia to you, including his own show, The Wrestling Memory Grenade. There's Regional Wrestling, The Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Puro Wrestling Academy, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the Other Ship podcast, the Captain's Corner podcast, and much, much more. Great host, great shows. I guarantee you'll learn something every time you tune in to the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Where do you find all these shows? How about starting it this way? Just log on to WrestleCopia.com. There's nothing else like it anywhere. We are back. Joe Puccio, my co-host, my wonderful co-host. Can you imagine a lovely 23-year-old woman listening to this show?
Sure, Bob.
No, seriously. Can you imagine, let's say, a model or a, how do I put it? Even just a normal college-bound 22-year-old female. Can you imagine her listening to the show? Is it possible? Could it happen?
It's possible, sure.
I don't know. To me, it would almost be like, I don't know, going to a Three Stooges fan festival, right, where they show all the old clips at midnight somewhere and being surrounded by a gaggle of college girls. I just don't see it happening. I will put it to my audience. If you are a female under the age of 30, contact me. I will put you on the show and I will ask you, what's wrong with you? What are you doing here? No, I would love to have a large female listenership. I really would. I just wonder, I hate to do an audience demographic. I would probably just cry.
Yeah, I'm going to guess it's not a huge demographic of this show, but hey, stranger things have happened. You never know.
But here's the difference. I think the wrestling audience of today is split right down the middle. It's different now. Women love wrestling now.
Oh, so you'd say it's about 50-50?
Now, yeah. Easily. And I think that the female wrestlers are the stars that a lot of women are into. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, yeah.
Think of the psyches. Cosmopolitan magazine for 50 years now has had a beautiful woman on their cover. Now you can imagine a beautiful woman on Playboy, but Cosmopolitan has beautiful women on their covers. There's not jealousy amongst women anymore. I think it's different. I think people admire other people for their skills and talents, and in some cases their beauty. And I think women are probably better at men than doing that.
It's true. If I had to guess, I would say it's more. I don't know if you have me sold on a 50-50 split, even in 2025, but it's certainly better than it was at one point. I mean, there's a lot more women, there's a lot more female fans now. I'm just trying to think about when we go to a live show, and just who's around. I don't know if I'd go as far as 50-50, but it's getting better. It's getting better. It's certainly close.
I will tell you this, my friend, and this is meant as a compliment to women all over America. I once worked for a company for about 3.5 years that was management was comprised 75% to 80% of women. It was the most organized, efficient, wonderful, caring company I have ever worked for in my entire career, no matter where I've worked. And that includes the PWI and everything else. I never worked for a company like the one I did for that lovely 3.5 years with great, talented people who always pulled together and worked as a team without even having to think about it. So I just say, bravo, women. I want women to lead America coming into the future very, very quickly. I think we'd have a better country if women ran the show. I just do. I just do. They're just more, they're less frivolous, more business oriented. I don't know how to put it.
I understand what you're saying. I would second that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides, we need something fresh.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, get off of our soapbox and get into wrestling. And this time we're going to talk about tag teams. We're going to talk about tag teams because our guests are two of your favorite people, John McAdam and Steve Gennarelli of the Stick to Wrestling podcast on the Arcadian Vanguard Network. And we're going to talk about the greatest tag teams in the 1980s. And that really was an amazing period for tag teams. Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, Road Warriors, all the great WWF champions. Just go down the line. Brody and Stan Hansen, just keep going and going. And the Andersons and the Horsemen, and just keep going and going and going. And now I look at today's wrestling in both of the major federations. Whatever happened to the tag team division? It ain't the same.
I've always been a huge tag team wrestling fan from when I started watching wrestling. I think it makes a much more interesting match. I love the different aspects and the strategy that go into a tag team match. I grew up with the 1980s scene, the 1980s tag teams, which arguably I would think that really was the heyday, the 1980s for tag team wrestling, whether it was WWF or the NWA and the other promotions as well. That's my memory. That's what I love. And I'll still watch those matches today. Nowadays, I think one of the problems is that there really aren't as many tag teams that's their primary role. They have a tag team name and that they're basically just going to go out there and have tag team matches. Now, bring two singles wrestlers together, put them in a match together. Even if they do give you a tag team for a year or so, it's inevitable that they're going to be split up within a few months anyway. So they're not going to really get much traction. Now, yes, they did split ups. They did turns in the 80s, 90s, 70s as well, but it was much more rare. They gave them much more time to hone their skills and to become a great tag team. Whereas now it's almost like they put you in a tag team, and as soon as you're in the tag team, they're already teasing dissension, where it's just a matter of time before one of the guys is going to turn on the other. So I think that's one of the issues with tag team wrestling in the modern day.
Well, you look at WWE recently, even with the women's division. What is it? Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill. That whole thing just happened, and Naomi getting in the middle of it, and now they're all hating each other or whatever.
Yep.
Again, it's a conduit to a feud, as opposed to a great tag team. It's getting to be cookie cutter again.
Yeah.
I will say this: the NWA tag team division was always way better than WWF. I don't care what anybody says. It was always salt and pepper shakers in the WWE and the F, right? The Moondogs, the Yukon Lumberjacks, the two evil Japanese guys. They were always two of the same thing. The Executioners, right?
Uh-huh.
Two of the exact same thing, interchangeable. If one of them got hurt, you brought in another one that looked just like the guy that's hurt. It was like they were always the same. And then in the 80s, they flipped that, and all the good guys looked the same. Strike Force and Can-Am Connection and la-di-da-di-da. They were always the same tights and the same shtick, and I frankly found it boring as hell. I did. It was the same thing over and over again. It wasn't two diverse personalities forming a great tag team like Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis, or Dick Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes. They were just. It was always just cookie cutter. It's almost like very little thought got put into it. I'm not saying the wrestlers weren't great, like Tito Santana, Rick Martel. Come on, they were awesome.
Yeah.
But you're held back when you had two guys in white trunks replaced by two other guys in white trunks 6 months later, right?
Yeah.
It was the same thing over and over again. And you know what? This is why I never really got excited, other than the time when the British Bulldogs came around. I thought that kind of changed things up a little bit.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I don't agree 100%. I mean, I did really those 80s WWF tag teams I really did enjoy. But I know what you're saying as far as the cookie cutter, and they were sort of interchangeable. I get that. It's funny though, you just mentioned the British Bulldogs, because the Bulldogs will always be my all-time favorite tag team. Just from watching old footage of them, Stampede footage, wherever they were before the WWF. But then obviously when they were on a national scale in the WWF, that's when I really started getting into them, watching all their matches. And then I started getting videotapes of their old stuff back when I was tape trading. Always been such a huge fan of that team. And again, I just felt like the athleticism in that era was just above everything else. I mean, the Bulldogs, the Killer Bees, the Rougeau brothers, the Hart Foundation, and that's a good example, I guess, of a team from that era that was completely different.
This is why I know you're my favorite co-host, because you always read my mind. I was just thinking about the Hart Foundation, but they weren't cookie cutters.
Right.
Yes, they had the same wrestling outfits, but you had powerful Jim Neidhart with all the power moves, and you had cunning, sneaky, scientific Bret Hart who could do everything.
Right.
And they meshed. They were like peanut butter and jelly. They were perfect together. They really were.
They really were. And it's funny because Neidhart, never really did much as a singles, at least in the WWF. He was limited in a lot of ways. But I mean, with Bret Hart, it's funny, they were one of the best tag teams of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And some of those matches between the Harts and the Bulldogs, incredible. And not just them. I mean, they had great matches with a lot of tag teams, even Demolition. There's something to be said for them.
This leads us to a really important question. During the Hogan era, was the tag team division actually way better than the championship level singles matches? It might have been.
Well,
if you think about the athletes that poured through there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about the Hogan's feuds, 100%, because Hogan,
Right.
those were, what are they, like 7-minute matches, and always the same formula. But I think so. If you're talking about maybe like the mid-card stuff, like the Intercontinental Championship,
they were better too. Yeah.
That it's hit or miss, because I mean, there was some great, that was kind of like the Workman's Championship. I mean, think about those matches with Tito Santana and Randy Savage and Greg Valentine, Don Morocco when they were the champions. So those were some good matches too. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it was definitely, by far, it exceeded the main event picture.
You know what? I'm tired. Maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy. I am tired now. The topic here is how it's all changed. Every tag team needs the name. I think the Street Profits are really good.
Mm-hmm.
But can't they just be, Dawkins and, can't they use their own names? Do they need the catchy name? They all need a catchy name.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Why did they ever stop taking two good wrestlers and putting them together? And then they discover how good they are together and just let them go. And it doesn't have to be a salt and pepper shaker as your champions. I mean, look at it now. Pretty Deadly and the Street Profits and what's the other tag team champions? The War Raiders.
Right.
All similar, very similar. Can it be two distinct personalities just mesh well together? Don't you miss those days too?
Yeah.
The NWA was loaded with tag team champions like those. Jay Youngblood and Rick Steamboat. Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle.
That's a good one.
Two totally different types. Two entirely different types that meshed good together. I find that far more interesting than the cookie cutter tag teams that they do now.
Yeah, you make some good points. I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, I think a really good example, like you said, was Ventura and Adonis, because they were very different too, but they worked. Like they worked well together. They really fit, which you wouldn't maybe think so on paper, but they really were a great tag team. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like we said, again, the Hart Foundation, even a team like Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake teaming up as the dream team in the 80s. That was, if you think about it, a sort of a difference in styles as well, because Valentine was really
Sure.
the technical, the technical powerhouse of that team. I mean, he really led that team. And then you had Beefcake, who, wasn't much in the ring, did the sort of I guess some of the power moves, but they worked as well too. I mean, they really worked, and obviously Beefcake got a huge run years later from that tag team as a babyface. But they're another example, the Dream Team.
Greg Valentine was so good. He could take my cat Bailey and become the tag team champ. If I saw him wrestle 2 bad matches, that's 2 than I recall, 2 more than I recall. Because I'm telling you what, he was really good, and that was a long career. 1970, he was one of the Fargo brothers.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
realize that? He was one of the Fabulous Fargos.
Right. Right. Right.
With I think Don Fargo, and then he became Greg Valentine, and he won championships everywhere he went. He didn't win the NWA World Title or the WWF, but he won everything else all the time. He always had a belter on his waist. Why? He was beyond dependable, beyond excellent in the ring. He can make you hate him. One of those guys, just had it all going on. And I think he's probably one of the most underrated super duper stars of all time. I mean, nobody's better than he was.
He is, and another thing about him was he was believable. He was a realistic wrestler. He was someone that you saw in that ring, whether he was doing his promos or he was in the ring, but he really seemed like a legitimate badass and a tough guy. He seemed like a typical old school wrestler. He didn't look like he was putting anything on. It didn't look like he was doing a gimmick. It looked like he was really who he was. He probably wasn't, you can't say he was the greatest on the mic, but he was real. He brought it. You felt like he was really who he said he was. And I always liked that.
I thought he was good on the mic. I'll tell you what, someday we're going to have to list the top wrestlers of all time who never for 3 seconds broke character. Number 1, I'd make Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah.
He absolutely looked like a crazy man every time he was out there. Greg Valentine never broke character. There's so many of them that were so good at what they did. You thought that's who they were when you met them. For in real life. I'm the first to admit the lines would get blurred. When I was with people meeting wrestlers left and right, I didn't know how much of their character was them.
Yeah.
Apparently, the real good ones, the character's nothing like them. But they do it so well that you think it's really them. Like if you were to meet Gunther, you think he'd sneer at you, I will not shake hands with such a weakly puning as you, what would he do? No, I don't think so. They're normal people now. But back in the day when they didn't break kayfabe, see, that's the problem. I came into the business at the very end of kayfabe. And some of them, even if you were in the business, would guard themselves and act like their characters and not get out of get out of that mode. I don't know what to say other than I kind of liked it the old way. It was more mysterious.
Oh, I did too. I mean, they'll talk about it. Wrestlers will talk about this in their interviews now. They couldn't, we've talked about this. They couldn't travel together. They couldn't be seen in public together. God forbid they were working out together or something like that. I mean, all had to be done in private. They could not run the risk of being seen together. And it was such a cooler sport to follow back then because there was a sense, again, and there's a sense of realism. Whereas now, like you said, these guys are on social media. They're showing you, pictures of their breakfast in the morning, what I ate. And, and it's just like you're so involved with their lives, which I get it. It's a different, we're in a different era now, but I completely agree. I long for those days back then. Do you remember when, talking about the kayfabe thing, like when Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik got busted together in a car with drugs on the wherever it was, the Jersey Turnpike or something like that? That was a huge deal back then because that broke kayfabe. I mean, those two guys, that was like, two countries battling each other. I mean, these were hated rivals, and it came out that they were traveling in the same car together, hanging out, as it turns out, doing drugs or whatever they were doing. But I mean, it just speaks for how different it is. If that would happen nowadays, of course, it would be a big thing because they were busted with drugs or something, things like that. But as far as them feuding or anything like that, nobody would bat an eye. Nobody would care about that part of it.
Before we get off this topic, I will say one thing. My favorite telephone interview of all time, and my telephone phone is I have a list of superstars that would knock your socks off. Roddy Piper, Jesse Ventura, Hogan, just go down the list of the people I spoke with when I was with PWI and WCW magazine, right? But my favorite interview phoner of all time was easily Colonel Robert Parker, Robert Fuller.
Yep.
And we're talking. I said, well, we're going to talk about such and such. Okay, great. Let's go. And I go, here we go. And I started asking questions. Bang, he's right in character.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fantastic. He goes, well, at the end of the interview, he goes, well, you know what? Everything's going so good. I'm sitting on my front porch looking at my mansion, looking out into the forest behind it. And I'm drinking a mint julep. And I'm telling you, it's worth millions. And I said, I couldn't help myself. I said, that's an expensive drink. And we both laughed for like 15 minutes because it's like he wasn't expecting a non-kayfabe response to something like that. And he said, yeah, I said that wrong, didn't I? But it was like, the old school guys who know that you're looking for, like for our WCW magazine, we're still doing kayfabe-ish interviews, but with real quotes.
Right.
So he got right into it, did it the exactly right way. I love the guys who get it. Robert Fuller got it his whole career. He was a great heel. In the 80s, he moved from place to place to place, and he had that, I forget what he called his faction, the Stud Stable. That's what it is, because he was the Tennessee Stud.
Yeah, of course.
And every time they went over, became lead heels within weeks. Another underrated guy, Robert Fuller. And his tag teams were awesome, too. He had a great tag team with Jeff Jarrett, but we'll let that rest for now. Joe, GenerationXWire.com, my friend. Growing by leaps and bounds. I don't even know what to say other than it's going good, isn't it?
It's going pretty well. Can't complain. I'm getting interviews pretty steadily with different people in all forms of entertainment, wrestling, movies, television. A lot more coming in the next few months. We're going to be. We actually just did one on. We did an article on the old Growing Pains television show, if you remember that, the old Kirk Cameron TV show from the 80s.
Yeah.
I spoke with Jeremy Miller, who played the youngest son on the show. So talked about his career, what he's doing now, his memories from the show. So that was a lot of fun. We have some movie reviews coming out. So yeah, I mean, it's always something different. There's going to be a lot of things. Actually, another thing that's coming on very, very soon. We're going to do a feature on Kate Kroll, who, if you don't know her name, she actually is. She just did a documentary on Luna Vachon. There's going to be a Luna Vachon documentary that's making the rounds. I'm going to be doing a feature on the documentary as well as Kate, ending with her career. So that's one to look for as well.
Luna Vachon documentary. That sounds interesting. I read about that. That's going to be huge for wrestling fans. Like I said before, in real wrestling terms, everybody loved her. She was a great lady. She really, I had a little dealings with her too. She was really great. She was really a wonderful person. And her early demise was very, very sad for all of us. And I'd like to know more in a non-exploitive way, and I think a film is just what she deserves.
Same. Yeah, I mean, I never met her, unfortunately, but just from her TV character and her wrestling style, I mean, it would make sense, right? That she was actually the complete opposite of that, because as we know, her character was just a maniac. I mean, she was unhinged, on screen, but from all accounts, from people that have known her and were close with her, she could be the complete opposite of that. So yeah, I'm really, really interested in her life and what went on behind the scenes there.
In my dealings with her, just the nicest person. She was impossibly nice. It's like within the first few words of speaking with her, we were like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, but there was no caste system with her. There was no barrier between her and any other human being on the planet. She was just a great person. Between wrestling books and documentaries, this is going to be a hell of a year this year. It really is. Anyway, thank you, Joe. It's always a pleasure. If you hang around and listen, we're going to have the guys from Stick to Wrestling, and we're going to talk about 80s tag teams. Get out your pen and see if you agree or disagree, or, tell me right now, who's the greatest tag team of the 80s? Who do you think? Who's your pick?
The British Bulldogs.
Whoa! You surprised me, my friend.
Again, they're my pick. I understand.
Yeah, that's what counts.
Right.
That's what counts.
Right. That's my
If they gave you the best memories, they're the best tag team. I go back to the 70s. Was Baron Mikel Cicluna the greatest wrestler in the world? No way.
Right.
Was he my favorite? More every day.
Yeah.
It's whoever brought you to the dance, right?
Exactly.
And you never lose your fondness for him, no matter how many years roll by. And there you go. All right, hang on. And then we're going to come right back with Steve and John. get a beer quick. And like, you know how these things go, they're a little long. So get a beer and maybe a half a pizza, not a whole one. What are you, slob? We'll be right back. It's that time again. It's what I call, as we put these things together, a list show. Our first two list shows were two of our most popular programs. The first one was the top 100 of the 70s. Then we did the top 100 of the 80s. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we change our focus. It's the top 50 tag teams of the 1980s. And I have two of the top podcasters in the whole wrestling world right here. It's the cast of Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. First of all, John McAdam, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Bob. How are you?
Oh, fair to middling, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on.
Our other guest, my buddy, the originator of the Steve Gennarelli point system for these lists. I am not going to let the cat out of the bag because the patent isn't sealed yet. I know we have to get that back from the U.S. government, but here he is, Steve Gennarelli. Steve, welcome back.
It's great to be back. John and I have been really having some great episodes lately on Stick to Wrestling, and it's great to be here with you here recording tonight.
You have, and before we get started, I will hype the Arcadian Vanguard podcast called Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, a classic wrestling nostalgia podcast. Nothing else like it out there, and one of my favorites. Guys, getting to know both of you the last couple of years has been a thrill for me, so I really welcome you back here.
Well, I mean, you're right for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I'm the one who's thrilled. And for those who don't know, Steve is there as my guest. I would say probably like 50 or 60% of the time, which is one reason why it's a really good podcast.
There you go. I have to concur.
Thank you for the kind words. And John comes up with most of our themes and topics, and he does a great job doing most of the legwork, and I just kind of fill in some of the blanks. And we have a great Facebook group, and a lot of people seem to enjoy the show, so I'm really happy about that.
Well, you know, that's what I'm most impressed with about Stick to Wrestling, John, is that, yeah, you do have these themes. And, you know, as you continue on, as long as you've been podcasting, I'm always thinking to myself, how do you guys do it? Because, you know, if you do it week after week after week for a number of years, you realize I've hit this topic, I've hit that topic, we've hit this time frame, we've done this person. But you always come up with something fresh every week. I got to hand it to you because that may be the hardest part of wrestling podcasting.
I think it is the hardest part of doing a wrestling podcast, figuring out something fresh to talk about. But I'm a weirdo. Like, I will be like, you know, brain locked for a topic or multiple topics. And I'll go take a shower and I'll come out with 10 or 15 different topics. I don't know why I get so creative in the shower, but here we are.
Yeah, it's very similar for me too when I'm trying to figure out what like our topic is going to be on the show, because it's like it'll just come to you. It's like when I was a songwriter with my band. I heard two guys arguing in a deli once, and that became the theme of one of my songs that I wrote on one of my albums. It's like the guy said, you know, you owe me $1.50. No, I owe you $2. Well, what are you trying to hand me? And I wrote a song called "What Are You Trying to Hand Me?" Right. So that's how life works. Something will hit you and you go, that's it. That's what I need. And it's funny with wrestling, you never run out of topics, especially the old stuff, you know, because it was such of the fabric of our use, all three of us. I know that. And it's like, it kind of warms the soul to do this old wrestling stuff as far as I'm concerned, because that was the stuff that really got me into it and led to a job in the business and everything else. So, you know, I'm grateful that I'm still talking about it after all these years.
Well, you know, I have some help too. I mean, if I ever want to get lazy, it's like, okay, what's on Peacock and what's the 40th anniversary of this, of whatever, or the 30th anniversary? I can just do a show on that. And I feel lucky because I feel like I'm good at picking guests. And I can pick a guest and we can get a good hour out of, you know, an hour of world-class championship wrestling from 1985. And plus, we do the WWF 40 years ago in review, so there's 12 shows a year. So I've got some help out there, Bob.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, I mean, it's the same with you. You're so creative. You really are. It's like Steve is always coming up with topics, and he's appeared on our Entertainment Hour show too. And he's like a whirling dervish of esoterica, and I got to give you credit for that. It's like you're fresh as a daisy every time I talk to you.
Well, I don't know about that, but I will say this. I mean, the 80s was really a sweet spot as far as tag teams. I mean, we had a really fun show where we looked back at the top 100 single stars in the 70s wrestling scene, but tag teams weren't really, with the exceptions of the Valiants and a few other teams, there really weren't like these rock solid long-term teams that we're going to discuss on tonight's show. So it's really kind of fun to look back at the 80s and what we have right in front of us.
Bob, I wanted to talk about this too. I mean, sometimes tag teams were tough. I mean, individual wrestlers, what is there? You just judge on based on what the guy actually did. You have to ask yourself questions like, okay, what was the most important tag team match of all time? Well, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. Were those really tag teams, or were they just tag teams for a day? Were they singles wrestlers working in a tag team one day? I'm going with the latter. And plus, you have to ask yourself, how long were these guys together? I gave extra points if they worked multiple territories. That's a good way of establishing that, yeah, you're a real tag team. I considered work rate, of course, and historical impact. And I mean, championships matter. And so does being in a big spotlight versus a small spotlight. I'm sorry, if you were a big deal in Memphis, the tag team that was a big deal in the WWF or the NWA is going to be ranked ahead of you.
Now, one of you guys, we'll get into this, ranked, and I'll just talk about this right here. Peter Morales and Bob Backlund on your list. They had won the tag team championship at Shea Stadium. And that's the only time they ever tagged up.
I think they tagged it on TV a couple of times.
Did they do warm-up matches for that? If they did, I'm blissfully unaware of that. Okay. But still, they weren't a regular tag team, right? Well, same difference. It's like, how can you rate them highly? It's hard.
Well, I had the idea of putting them on my list. More of a kayfabe look at what fans all over the world are thinking what they could have been. Like, could you imagine them getting rematches with the Samoans, or if they had stuck around and defended against the Moondogs or Fuji and Saito, or how would this have affected Bob Backlund's singles championship, the WWF championship? Maybe these tag teams would have decimated him to the point of dropping the belt to a Ken Patera or Greg Valentine in 1980. Who knows?
But John makes a good point too. It's like, I did tend to weigh the teams that stuck together much higher.
Right.
Much higher. Some people had a spurt where they were good for 6 months and then you never saw them again. That's what makes tag teams so different. But here the thing about the 80s is the top teams stuck together for years. They don't do that anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, longevity counts. And like I said, I mean, I'm going to use the term, it's tough to rank these guys. I'm going to try not to use that as much as I feel like I need to, because, they're tough to rank.
I wanted to ask both of you guys this question. Were there teams that you can think of now that just missed the top 50? Were there some that just narrowly missed the list?
For me personally, there's one team that it's not a glaring omission, but I wish I had put them on, but I mean, I'd be changing my list forever. It's, deadlines are deadlines. Ivan Koloff and Don Kernodle, were they historically significant? Not really. But they did hold the NWA World Tag Team Championships, and they were a really good team. Other than that, I think I'm pretty satisfied with my top 50, and there's not much difference between 50 and 51. But there's no one out there, aside from that one tag team, that I'm like, oh, man, I wish I'd wedged them in.
Well, I will mention a team that would have been on my list and would have been at least in the middle of the pack, if not significantly higher, had there been cell phones in the 80s. The team of Hogan and Orndorff would have been high on the list. Because as you guys might remember, Hogan missed an important call. Orndorff called him. They'd probably still be champs now.
No, Steve, I must speak. It wasn't that he couldn't get through.
Okay.
It's that he wouldn't get off the bench press to talk to Paul Orndorff.
Oh my God, that's even worse.
I know, huh?
Even worse. But yeah, had there been cell phones, they would have been champions, and they'd be on this list.
All right.
Well, my situation is a little different in that I always look things like I don't want to leave big territories out. That was the hard part on this list and all the lists. Because I think of Calgary, I think of Florida, I think of Continental, I think of Memphis, I think blah, 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 blah. But there's only 50 people that can make or 50 teams that can make the list,
Right.
So in that regard, there were some teams I used to enjoy that didn't even come close to making the list because I just didn't think they had the, if we're talking the 50 best or 50 most memorable, if you want to put it that way, you got to have a little brand recognition there. It's hard. It's hard. You may saw the great technical team in, let's say, Calgary or something. Like I had, I think Owen Hart and somebody on my list, but it's like whoever saw it, whoever saw the team. So it's like, how do you weigh it? Did those belts mean as much? There's 1,000 factors that go into these things.
I had Brian Pillman and Bruce Hart under consideration, but like you said, Bob, I only had 50 spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I say without further ado, let's start with our list. But what order should we go in?
I'm going first. It's my doggone show.
All right.
That sounds good.
What do you think of that, guys? Huh? All right.
I think it's your doggone show.
It's my doggone show. We're going to go back by tens, right? And this will be shorter than our other shows, fans, because last time we had 100. That adds some length to your show, but this should be hopefully a little more succinct. And we'll add our little entertainment. So here we go. I'm going to go. We're going backwards, right, from 50 to 1. Number 50 on mine. I had to hold my nose to put these guys on. Jay and Jules Strongbow.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I didn't have to hold my nose. I just left them off.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Well, you're smarter than I am. I just, here's the deal. They did accomplish a little bit. I didn't think they were, that was probably Jay's last gasp, and Jules was, he was really Frankie Hill, and it's my brother Jules. I'll never forget when he showed up on TV. And Jay goes, "It's my brother Jules," and I went, "What?"
We never knew.
No, we never knew. Yeah.
I'll give the Strongbows credit. When they first came back, and Steve and I talked about this 3 years ago when we talked about WWF 1982, they were hot as a pistol when they first got in.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of booked them poorly, and they lost momentum quickly. And of course, they weren't exactly, Tatsumi Fujinami in the ring.
Right. But you know what? I saw a couple solo matches with Chief Jules. He could go pretty good. He was a good wrestler. I think that the tag team kind of held him back a little bit because Jay was so slow and plotting at that point. And Jay also had the worst finisher in the history of anything, that little double chop to the throat that looked like it couldn't hurt a puppy, But that was what they did. So, but I gave them their ranking because they won the championship. What can I say? Number 49, Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka.
Okay.
All right. Number 48, the only, there's a caveat, the original WWF version of the Moondogs. Randy Colley, to me, is one of the most underrated wrestlers who got swallowed by his gimmicks. But he was paired with Sailor White, who, a moondog with Navy tattoos all over him. I mean, how does that work? Who put them on when they're living in the woods? Who put those tattoos on them? I just, it didn't work for me. But I will say that they did make their mark, and there were Moondogs for years to come after that. So they're at 48. Here's what I'm surprised you guys didn't put on, both of you. Bill and Scott Irwin, the Long Riders, the Super Destroyers.
I considered them.
I considered them as well.
Yeah, multiple federations and what have you. 46 were Brian Pillman and Bruce Hart. I had these guys a little lower than you guys. In fact, probably a lot lower at 45. Kernodle and Sergeant Slaughter. These guys barely made the list. Rick and Scott Steiner, who didn't win their first NWA tag team until late in '89, but they made such a splash that they eked onto the list. 43, Gene and Ole Anderson. 42, the Nasty Boys. And 41, the on and off pairing of Don Morocco and Bob Orton Jr.
One of my favorite teams.
Well, a couple of things. I had Morocco and Orton at 43. In a weird way, they were kind of a sad tag team. It was like, we used to be main eventers. We've both main evented Madison Square Garden multiple times, and now we're just doing this tag team thing where we're fighting the Killer Bees.
Actually, Morocco got a decent babyface push after that team broke up. But but that lasted 6 months or so. John, do you want to go next?
Number 50, the Killer Bees. I had them in because they were around for a long time in the biggest wrestling company in the world. And they were good. They were good in the ring, but did the Killer Bees ever do anything memorable? I mean, aside from the double switch with the masks, no, they were just kind of another tag team. But again, they had plenty of spotlight being in the WWF. Number 49, Bobby Eaton and Coco Ware. A phenomenal in-ring tag team. Everyone's like, oh, they're so underrated. No, they're not. You say Bobby Eaton and Coco Ware, and people are going to start ranting about them. Again, they were only 49 because they were together for a short time in a small promotion, but they were so good, I wanted to give them a nod. You know what? Same thing for my 46, Terry Gordy and Jimmy Snuka. They were not around together very long, but when they were together, it was must-see TV. Same thing with my number 48, Dennis Condrey and Dr. D. David Schultz. They were in Knoxville. I was watching them on cable, one of the first times I ever got to see non-WWF wrestling in February 1980, and I was absolutely blown away by these two. Jim Cornette says they're the best tag team he's ever seen outside of the Midnight Express. 47, Sting and Steiner, Rick Steiner, same thing. They were a really good tag team. They were with the UWF, which was a pretty big promotion. And they were really good. Let me see. We did Gordy and Snuka at 46. Number 45, the Islanders. The heel Islanders were a fantastic tag team. They had a couple of great matches in Boston against Rick Martel and Tito Santana. But again, at the end of the day, like, what do you really remember about these guys? They were around for a while and they were good, and that's it. Number 44, a tag team that I think could have gone on to have been as big as the Midnight Express or the Rock and Roll Express had they just gotten the opportunity was Chavo and Hector Guerrero. To this day, 40 years later, I am disappointed that JCP never picked up on these guys. I have heard that Chavo could be problematic. I have no idea. People talk about, well, they were kind of small. They weren't any smaller than the Rock and Roll Express, and they got over. So they could have had great feuds with the Rock and Roll Express in the NWA. I know that they had that little mini feud in Mid-South, but that doesn't really count. And at some point, turn them babyface and have them feud with the Midnight Express, but it never happened. 43, we talked about Morocco and Orton. 42, the Pretty Young Things, Norvell Austin and Sweet Brown Sugar. They were a good... By the way, Sweet Brown Sugar is Coca Ware, so he's in there twice. They did big things in Florida and then got a nice push in World Class, and they were really good in the ring. And number 41, Jacques and Ramon Rougeau. They were together for a long time. They did big things in Montreal, which didn't draw a lot of eyeballs, but they were a really good tag team in the WWF, and I loved them as heels with Jimmy Hart as their manager.
PYTs is a great pick. I wish I had them on my list. That was a really, really good pick. Right. I commend you for that one.
And I do like the Guerreros too. I agree completely that they were completely not used to their potential.
No. And again, some of it might have been a personality thing. I've heard from more than one person that Chavo was difficult to get along with. But I mean, a lot of guys are difficult to get along with. They were great in the ring.
Yeah, he was one of the most underrated workers in wrestling in that period of 70s to the 80s, I think. But to give you guys my list, 50, Backlund and Morales, we've already talked about that. 49, I had the New Breed, which started here in Florida, Sean Royal and Chris Champion. They became, for a short period of time, a hot team in Jim Crockett Promotions. And then there was a car accident. They both got injured, and they were never the same after that. Number 48, the Simpson brothers that were popular from World Class Championship Wrestling. Two guys that looked like they'd be on the cover of 16 or Tiger Beat. They were really very popular with the girls, I'm sure. Number 47, a team I never really cared for, Fuji and Saito, but the fact that Aaron Boone still remembers them, I got to put them on this list. 46, Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. For those that watch the AWA on ESPN, their feud with the Rockers was the only worthwhile thing to watch for a period of time on ESPN wrestling. 45, the Killer Bees, like John said, they were around for a long period of time. I think Brunzell is a very underrated worker. B. Brian Blair was so bland and so milquetoast, he brought the team down. 44, the Fabulous Rougeau brothers. They were good workers. I think Jacques got to show off some of his ability as the Mountie later on, but they were good workers. I also had the PYTs at 43. I had Eddie Gilbert and Sting at 42. And to round out the bottom 10, I had the Samoan SWAT team at 41.
Now, you see, I'm starting to think I should have had either Rose and Summers or the Samoan SWAT team instead of the Killer Bees. The Samoan SWAT team, I remember getting tapes of World Class, back in late 87, early 88, where the promotion was kind of struggling a little bit, and the SST was a bright spot on that show. And then they finally came to the NWA, and they didn't do much. They had the kind of a small feud with the Road Warriors, but they were always really good. So I now regret not having them on. Rose and Summers were really good in the ring, but I mean, they just had such a minor league stink to them. I'm sorry.
But they did have Sherry with them at the time, and she gave them a kind of that hot factor there because again, this was at a time when the women really weren't featured, especially in the AWA.
Well, it was, Sherry, now to me, and we're talking about 1986 Sherry Martel.
That's right.
To me, it was like, okay, they've got this woman wrestler in their corner. It was before Sherry had some of her work done, if you know what I'm saying. So, they were a good in-ring team, and I liked the feud with the Rockers, but, like I said, there was something about the whole thing, Buddy, it was funny the first time Buddy Rose said he was 219 pounds. I don't know about the 34th time.
No, right. I'll have something to say about them coming up quite shortly.
Let's hear it.
All right, you ready for the next bunch? Now, here's the one controversial thing I will say. Number 40, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, a team that formed. I insist, and I don't care what anybody says. I think that team was formed to try to get Beefcake over because he wasn't over. Do you remember the introduction of Beef strut around the ring and
Oh yeah.
And his finisher was a knee lift? What?
I remember that.
So it's like, I really honestly think that team was formed with Johnny Valiant as their manager just to get Beefcake over.
That's a real possibility because, as we all know, Brutus Beefcake and Hulk Hogan were best buds at that time.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, they did make their mark. They did win the belts from Wyndham and Rotunda with the cigar bet.
Right.
Remember the cigar in the eye bet? I think Wyndham got the cigar in the mush. So, but they made their mark. They were around longer than I thought they were going to last. So I put them on the list. I think they deserved their spot here.
I heard a long time ago that they were given the titles, and we'll talk about this on Stick to Wrestling when the title change comes about, because Vince McMahon was not happy with Barry Windham's attitude. I don't know if that's true or not, but I definitely heard it a long time ago.
Mm.
It makes sense, though.
Yeah, I could see that. All right, 39. I thought these guys meshed together. I was much more of an AWA fan than most people were in that era. It's Scott Hall and Curt Hennig.
Oh, yeah.
The developing Scott Hall with the always good Curt Hennig, and they had their share of success there. And now at 38, I have, like John had, the Islanders. 37, I'm sure I'm the only one that had this tag team on my list. Ivan Putski and Tito Santana from early in the decade. They held the championship for quite a long time, so that earned it for me. 36, somebody else, I think I was the only one that had this too. The stud stable of Robert Full and Jimmy Golden. Mainstays.
They were a regular tag team for a long time.
And in more than one place.
Yes.
They were in Continental and another federation that I can't think of, and Memphis. They were all over the South. So I give them their props.
I think they're in South Atlantic Pro Wrestling.
Yes, that's very good. That's right. That's one of the spots they landed in. Very good, John. Oh, no, but this guy knows his stuff, doesn't he? 35, Playboy Buddy Rose and Doug Summers, who did win the AWA championship. I was a Doug Summers fan, and I'll tell you why. Another guy that came up the hard way, I think he was a referee to start. If my knowledge base is that accurate, he really took his lumps all over the wrestling world. He wrestled all over America. And I kind of thought it was kind of cool that after all those years, he got a belt simply by dyeing his hair and calling himself Pretty Boy. So I don't know. I kind of liked, and they also were in one of the best TV matches I've ever seen against the Rockers. That bloody war that they had, where they ended up throwing Gennarelli onto the chair outside the ring.
The one where they had blood on the camera lenses.
Yeah, a great match, a great televised. You want to see heat? Check out that match, seriously, at the Showboat. Number 34, Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude. NWA mainstays. 33, Rick Martel and Tito Santana. 32, King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd. And I only listed them on my list. We all did this differently. I just have the Von Erichs written down.
That's fine.
But what I did when compiling the points is that when you guys were more specific, they got those points. So they're listed as those tag teams. Okay. And that takes us to Mr. McAdam.
Well, I wanted to say this too, Bob. I wish I had reached out to you with more questions because, I would have liked, you're like, okay, wow, you gave me 2 Midnight Expresses. I'm like, hey, I can put them together, no problem. Like Ivan Koloff and Nikita Koloff, I didn't think they did enough together. Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev, I just wasn't that impressed with, even though they were NWA Tag Team Champions for a little while. But if I put them together as the Russians, or if I put Kerry, Kevin, and David together as the Von Erichs, like, it would have been a lot different. So I wish I had asked you more questions.
You know what? It didn't even really register to me as we thought about coming up with these lists. I don't think it hurts the list because when you look at the 50 as they're compiled, it's just like it was with the singles. It all works, and I think they're in the spots they would have been in regardless. So I think it's really not that bad.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I had a tag team that came together kind of late in the decade, number 40, and that's Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Mike Rotundo as part of the Varsity Club. Number 39, Rick Martel and Tito Santana. That feels a little bit low, but because they were WWF Tag Team Champions and they were a good team. But, I mean, just very little impact, in my opinion. 38, I have Ken Lucas and Ricky Morton. One big reason is because they were a real tag team, both in Memphis and in Southwest Championship Wrestling. And, I mean, they were a good tag team. I would have never guessed that Ricky Morton, in 1982, I would have never guessed that he would have had the career he had, and I'm very happy for him. Number 37, Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. They were the tag team champions for a little while, and they were together for a couple of years. They were an okay tag team. Number 36, I went with the Moondogs. I was not a big Moondogs fan. I really wasn't, but I can't take away the fact that they held the WWF Tag Team Championships, which was a big deal in 1981. They got a push in Georgia, and then they got a big push in Memphis. So I give them extra points for that. Number 35, we're getting to the teams I really like here, the Fantastics. Their run in the NWA, they had a good run with the Midnight Express, but very little else. And after that, it's just Memphis and World Class. But again, that's 3 real territories that they worked. Number 34 is Ken Patera and Jerry Blackwell, who were the AWA Tag Team Champions for over a year. So you got to give it to them. Number 33 was a tag team that I never felt really gelled, and that's Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez. And then I learned years later that no one in the triangle of Rick Rude, Manny Fernandez, or Paul Jones actually liked each other. So I think that had something to do with it. But again, I have to give them credit. They were the NWA Tag Team Champions for 7 or 8 months during an era where that was really important. Number 32, I had Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis. Dear listener, if you have not seen the episode of TNT where Adrian Adonis takes Gene Okerlund and Dick Murdoch on a tour of Lower Manhattan. You have not lived. This skit was unbelievably funny. And number 31, I have Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito. They were the tag team champions twice in the WWF. They were a big deal, and they got more heat live than any other team I've ever seen. So I give them a little bit of extra credit for that.
Very well done. I
Excellent.
I'm having fun with this. Steve, I can't wait to hear your next 10.
No, and here they come. Number 40, I have Doom, Ron Simmons, and Butch Reed, which, them coming out with the mask, I always thought that was cheesy, and I didn't care for that. But they were a good team. They provided some good matches. 39, Jimmy Snuka and Ray Stevens, which were a team in the Mid-Atlantic area for a while. Number 38, The Powers of Pain, which had runs in Jim Crockett Promotions and in the WWF. In fact, I was there the night they debuted in the WWF with Tito Santana by their side, so they would get a pop reaction, a fan favorite reaction. 37, Coco Ware and Bobby Eaton, that John mentioned already. They were really popular. 36, The Sheiks, Jerry Blackwell and Ken Patera, AWA stars. They were kind of a real heat attraction in the AWA for a while. Number 35, the Funk Brothers, which is kind of a low ranking for them since they're legends, but they really didn't work that much in the U.S., and that's why they were ranked lower, because most of their activity was in Japan in the 80s. 34, the Islanders, Haku and Tama, Tonga Kid and Haku, two extremely great workers, and as John said, they didn't really have any important roles, but their matches were, of high quality. 32, King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd. And at 31, the Varsity Club, Steve Williams and Mike Rotunda.
Well, Steve, I have a couple of things to say about your picks. Doom I actually disagree with. I was there in Philadelphia at Halloween Havoc in 1989 when they debuted.
Mm-hmm.
They come out with Woman and this big guy Nitro, and there's a little kid sitting in front of us, had to be literally 8, 9, 10 years old, and he's laughing and he's saying that's Butch Reed and Ron Simmons. And to me, they only teamed for 2 months in 1989. So, I mean, I didn't consider them. Jimmy Snuka and Ray Stevens were Pro Wrestling Illustrated Tag Team of the Year for 1980. And I consider them based on just that. And they were the NWA Tag Team Champions for a little while. But that's really all I've got on them. I don't remember really anything about Snuka and Stevens other than, I do remember they were the champions. No, I didn't remember them getting Tag Team of the Year. Powers of Pain easily could have been on my list. They just missed. And like Steve said about the Funks, I mean, aside from, doing a couple of dates in Florida in like 1982, they just didn't do much in the United States. So they were hard to rank, and ultimately I left them off.
All right, I'm going to hit you with my number 30, which is Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, who I liked way better than most of the face WWF teams because they were different from one another and they didn't dress alike. I always call the WWF tag team division, both heels and faces, the salt and pepper shaker division, because both of the heels would look the same and both of the faces would look the same, or they tried to make them, just match sets. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember the good old days when, a tag team didn't have a name. They were just a tag team.
Exactly.
Martel and Tony Garea. They didn't have to be twins out there.
Exactly right. And number 29, one of my favorite acts from my PWI days was the Varsity Club, Steve Williams and Mike Rotundo. I laughed. I enjoyed their matches. I liked it from soup to nuts. I didn't think it lasted long enough because nothing good in the NWA ever lasted long enough back then. So, 28, Raymond and Jacques Rougeau. Number 27, and Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff. I put it to you, John. They had a big 1987 after Nikita turned face.
They really did.
I think they were super duper over, and just their popularity alone. And I remember just being. I think they were still working together when I started at PWI in '88, so I put them on the list.
I really considered them because I'm looking at old cards from, let's say, the Philadelphia Civic Center. And I'm like, okay, you're going to rank Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez, but Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff as a tag team are the main event every night against Ivan Koloff and what's his name, Vladimir Pietrov. So that's why, like I said at the beginning, some of these teams, they're tough to rank.
Yeah, I understand. Sure. 25, Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. They were WWF or tag team champion. And I will say this. I attended a card at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center when they were champions. The only thing I remember about the entire TV taping was Adonis and Murdoch. They were that good that night. I was telling Steve before that suplex where Murdoch would hold the guy upside down for about 22 seconds. Oh man, cold-blooded. Just they were the most action-packed thing on the whole show, and I will never forget that tag team. I thought they were great.
Let me say this really quick too. I remember watching them. I had never seen them before they came to the WWF in 1984, and I was absolutely thrilled by how good they were at cheating.
Yeah.
They were like nothing I'd ever seen before when it came to cheating, and that's how you be a good heel.
And I was shocked that they won the WWF tag team belts because they were unlike anything else on the show at that point. You know, they weren't characters. They were still the guys you would have seen in the NWA if they tagged together like that.
And they never had a manager, which is rare for WWF.
It was rare. Exactly right, Steve. Yes. 25, the Killer Bees, mainly because B. Brian Brother would go, bzz,
I didn't consider that.
No, you see? You gotta look at it from all sides. No, it was Dave Rosenbaum, my staffer friend that used to complain about that. He goes, I can't take it. He would sit at his desk and go, I can't take the Killer Bees. 24, the Powers of Pain for both their stints in the NWA and WWF. 23, Sting and Lex Luger. Again, drawing power, that type of thing. Plus, I thought they mixed pretty well. 22, we had Adrian Adonis again, plus Jesse Ventura. And 21, the first African-American WWF Tag Team Champions, Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas.
Sting and Luger won the Crockett Cup, and they did team regularly, so I probably should have given them more consideration. But at the same time, it was like one of these part-time teams. So it once again, me using that cliche, it's tough to rank them.
But you know what? They were the type of team that could headline.
Yes, they would headline.
Exactly. I mean, if you're in the main event during that era, I think that meant a lot to I remember that, and I think that swayed my allegiance to that particular placement.
Number 30, Ted DiBiase and Steve Dr. Death Williams. They teamed frequently enough, in my opinion, in Mid-South, and they did hold the tag team titles, and they were an outstanding tag team. People forget Steve Williams in 1985, 1986, he still wasn't that good yet, but Ted DiBiase could carry anybody. Number 29, in sort of contradiction to me not including, let's say, Dusty and Nikita, I have King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd, but they were such a dominant tag team in 1985 and 1986, and one thing that kind of, made the difference for me was they got on TV, I want to say April 1986, and they wrestled the British Bulldogs. It had to be after April 86 because the Bulldogs were the tag team champions. And, I mean, Bundy and Studd just dominated them. I don't know if you guys remember that match, but it looked like, okay, these guys are too good for the tag team division. You know what? I'll skip to 27, too. Big Boss Man and Akeem just destroyed the Rockers at WrestleMania, the one in 1989, which is WrestleMania 5. They teamed regularly, and they just looked dominant. And plus, they were on the main event of the Saturday Night's Main Event, where Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan broke up. So they have a little bit of historical significance due to that as well. Let me see. Number 28, I skipped Adrian Adonis and Jesse the Body Ventura. Number 26, Rick Martel and Tony Garea get credit for having 2 real runs as WWF Tag Team Champions. And I heard a long time ago that they were supposed to, lose to the Moondogs and just leave the area like every other tag team did. And the decision was made like, hey, these guys are too over to just get rid of. We're going to give them another run with the titles. And I was so impressed by that. I'm like, okay, I've got to have these guys. Tony Garea had wound down at this point, but Rick Martel was good enough to carry anybody. Number 25, they were together for only about a year, but Ole Anderson and Arn Anderson were spectacular in 1985 and 1986. We talked about this a little bit on Sick to Wrestling. Arn Anderson was in a tag team in 1983 with Matt Bourne, which apparently no one's included for good reason. Doesn't that sound like a good team? Arn Anderson and Matt Bourne. No, they stunk. They did. I mean, go back and look at the matches. They were boring. I remember when Arn came back in 1985, I'm like, oh, God, this guy again. And Arn won me over. He got way better, and he absolutely carried his end of the log. Number 24, the Hart Foundation. I mean, what can you say? They were a dominant tag team in the WWF from the time of their formation, April 1985. Steve and I just talked about this. Throughout the decade, they held the tag team titles. Number 23, I don't know if either of you guys are going to have this tag team, and I would understand because they weren't together that long, but when they were together, they were getting a mega push both on Mid-Atlantic TV and Georgia TV as the NWA Tag Team Champions when Ole was trying to make that a thing, and that's Ole Anderson and Stan Hansen. Number 22, if you listen to Sick to Wrestling, you know how I feel about this tag team. They not only don't they suck, they were good. Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, and they were together for a long time. So I know that's a sort of an unpopular opinion, maybe, but I go back and watch their matches. It was a good tag team, and Beefcake was not as bad as people make him out to be. And finally, number 21, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo not only got their start in Florida, but they came to the WWF and held the tag team championship twice. And once they both left the WWF, they got together again a couple of times.
Well, I would give John my first major criticism of this show. How he could list the Hart Foundation this low is an outrage.
I thought they were a good tag team, but not a great tag team. But as Gene Okerlund would say, criticism.
Well, the thing is, I mean, this team debuted in early 1985, and they'd be together until the early 90s. John, what do you want out of these teams? They should be in your top 10.
I want more. It's a valid criticism. I mean, you're right. They were together for 4.5 years. That helps. They held the tag team titles. I mean, by 1988, they were starting to break them up a little and make Brett more of a single star, but they still teamed every now and then. So it's a valid criticism.
And I will give you credit for acknowledging the team of Bossman and Akeem, which were called the Twin Towers at the time. We got to give them their official name in there.
I say nothing. I despise the Akeem character. I can't. I can't. It's like here, have a piece of blueberry pie, and you take a bite, and it's peach. It's not right. It's just not right.
This is a man.
I can't.
This is a George Gray super fan here. All right, let me.
But
move
you know
on
what?
to my
I want
top
to
three.
you know what? I will say
Please.
this one man gang I liked.
Yeah.
I've never understood why they turned one man gang into Akeem unless it was just, Vince Patterson and whoever, entertaining themselves a little bit too much. I never really understood why one man gang didn't have a big run against Hulk Hogan.
That would have been really
That's
good.
true.
You're right. Absolutely, you're right.
That's true. All right, I'll give you guys my top next 10. At 30, Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson, for all the reasons already mentioned. At 29, the U.S. Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. You got to give Captain Lou a lot of credit for giving a lot of the color to that otherwise bland team. At 28, the East-West Connection, the incredible Adrian Adonis and the future governor Jesse the Body Ventura. At 27, only because they were a team for parts of 3 different years, from 84 to 86. Roddy Piper and his ace, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. Definitely a great main event tag team, even though they teamed rather infrequently. 26, the very popular Don Kernoodle and Sergeant Slaughter. Number 25, the Dream Team, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. Number 24, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov with their unbelievable manager, the Hollywood fashion plate, Freddie Blassie. Number 23, one of John's favorite teams. I'm surprised they haven't been mentioned yet. The Devils duo, Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. At 22, Ole Anderson and Stan Hansen from the early 80s. And I had the Koloffs, Ivan and Nikita at number 21.
You taught me something I didn't know. I never knew they were referred to as the Devil's Duo.
Well, Bob, there's a reason for that.
Why is that?
I have never heard them referred to as the Devil's Duo. I saw Steve's list, and that kind of jumped out at me, and I didn't say anything. And maybe they were referred to that at some point. But
they must have been, right, Steve?
I never heard.
I got it from this great source called Wikipedia, and they're never wrong. So
okay.
No, I could see that though. I could see that.
Gino with horns sticking out of his head. I like it.
Yeah. For some reason, we're talking about Gurria and Martel, and I can't get Vince McMahon's call when they lost the titles to Fuji right in the eyes with pure salt. And look at Martel, which freaked me out because they had Japanese wrestlers throwing salt for 15 years that I knew of in every match, and all of a sudden he acted like he'd never seen it before, which always freaked me out. But that's Vince for you, right?
Well, that was getting closer to the time when he owned the company, I guess. So it was more it's more important to him now.
Yeah, right. All right. Now this next pick, I'm looking at it and I'm going, damn, that's too high. But I was there in St. Louis one night, and here come the Skyscrapers right at the end of the decade, right? Vicious and Spivey. And the place went unglued. I'm having in my top 20 because for the minute they formed that team, they were over.
Mm-hmm.
Popovers, turnovers, you name it, they were over. they and their matches were nothing. They lasted about 3 minutes, a bunch of power bombs, beating up jobbers. They would have sold tickets if you said they were going to take on Joe Turco and Frankie Williams. I am telling you. I have never seen during my PWI years something go over that quick. So they may be at number 20. You can yell at me later. All right.
Well, let me say this really quick. I'm going to refer to Halloween Havoc 1989. I was there live.
Right.
We got to see what a lot of people were looking at as a dream match that happened for the first time. Sid Vicious and Danny Spivey against the Road Warriors. And it was like 2 minutes into that match, all of the oxygen got sucked out of that place. It was like, oh boy, this match is going to be a stinker and these guys don't know what they're doing. So I kind of held that against them a little bit.
Okay, that makes sense. Sure. Yeah, but, you know something? Our individual experiences, I think, are worthy of where you place your wrestlers on a list like this. You know what I'm saying? What you saw with your own eyes will always be of your benefit when you're making out a list like this. And I think my remembrance makes sense, and I think your remembrance makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
It means a lot too. I mean, I saw a match, same match in Boston and Springfield, where it was the Skyscrapers against Davey Rich and Johnny Rich. And Davey Rich did this incredible spot where Sid would clothesline him, and Davey Rich did this like incredible 450-degree, like, turning in the air, selling that clothesline. And Sid would just get on one knee and like kind of motion to the crowd, hey, check me out. And the place ate it up. So, I mean, that's my positive remembrance of the Skyscrapers.
Well, there's the thing.
I'm going to add a positive memory of the Skyscrapers too, since Bob mentioned this.
Mm-hmm.
Back to this will take you guys back. Do you remember your first rotisserie team and when rotisserie started, baseball rotisserie? Back to the days of Ben McDonald starting for the Baltimore Orioles. My first team was named the Skyscrapers, and I kept that name all the way up till like last year. So,
wow.
So the impact of that team.
All right, Steve. So you started what, like 90?
Yeah, that was probably my first year. Yeah.
My first draft was April 1st, 1985, and I was all over Ricky Henderson.
John, you're way ahead of me, I tell you.
That was all over Alfredo Griffin, too. So it all cancels out. A shortstop that steals bases? Let me get him. He hits 230 or whatever.
That's right. All right. Should I continue?
Please do.
Yes, please.
So I did Fujin Saito at 19. I'm not sure, but that's who's there. 18, Jack and Jerry Briscoe. More brothers, Hardy Har, Ivan and Nikita Koloff, or was he the nephew? I don't
Nephew.
remember. But yeah.
That's right.
16, here's what I wrote down. Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, AWA tag champs when it meant something. It
Very
actually
true.
still meant something at that point. 15, Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. Still rampaging through Japan, and that doesn't even count Terry and Haas Funk in the WWF, where they decided to go to Party City and put Dory in chaps and all this stuff. Oh gosh! But even though they won their match at WrestleMania 2, that didn't even weigh into the greatness of Terry and Dory Funk to me. Number 14, the Fantastic Fulton and Rogers. Boy, were they athletic! They were amazing. Number 13, 5-time NWA Tag Team Champions Rick Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. Number 12, probably first hardcore tag team, the Sheepherders, not the Bushwhackers, and I wrote that on here. They're number 12 for being the Sheepherders, not the Bushwhackers. The Bushwhackers were a comedy show. The Sheepherders were vicious and wild and unrelenting and just nonstop brutality for its time. And of course, you saw them in virtually every London magazine, looking like they just had a spaghetti eating contest. They were always covered in red. And you know what? They were really good at that. People forget it before they became the cartoon show that they became. But I think they're very influential. And number 11, the Midnight Rockers / the Rockers, the beginning of quite a scene.
I can shed some light on Terry and Dory Funk Jr. From what I heard from a really good source, they were going to do the British Bulldogs defending the WWF Tag Team Championships against Dory and Terry, going around the horn with that, probably into the summer. And Terry Terry was used to wrestling Hulk Hogan in the main event, maybe in a tag team match, Junkyard Dog high on the card or in the main event. And he figured out what he was going to be making, in a tag team match further down the card every night against the British Bulldogs. So he faked blowing out his knee at WrestleMania 2.
Yeah, his horse got sick.
Interesting. Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that story before.
Yeah, I got it from someone who I totally believe the story from. Anyway, number 20, I have the Midnight Rockers / the Rockers, same tag team in the WWF and the AWA. They had some phenomenal matches in late 88, early 89 with Tully and Arn. I mean, it was like, blew away anything that the WWF had done for years. Number 19, a bit of a mistake. I could have lumped the Von Erichs all together, but I didn't. So I went with Kevin and David at number 19. They were a main event tag team in Dallas. They held different tag team titles. They teamed pretty frequently until David passed away. It was weird. Kevin teamed with Kerry. He teamed with David, but like Kerry and David seemed to team rarely, which was kind of off. Number 18, Gino Hernandez and Tully Blanchard. They were a top tag team. They held the Southwest Tag Team titles, but not only that, they did main event Southwest Championship Wrestling, and they main evented in Houston, and they were together for a long time. They were together for a solid 3 years. Let me see. Number 17, tough to rank, Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler. They teamed on and off throughout the decade. They would team and then they'd get into a fight and they'd feud, then they'd get back together. But they were AWA Tag Team Champions back when that kind of still meant a little bit. Number 16, the Fabulous Ones. Once they got out of Memphis, I don't think they were as impressive. I think they probably could and should have gone to JCP, at least to start as a heel team. I don't know why they weren't brought in. But when they were in Memphis, they were a big, big deal. And like I said, you can't take that away from them. And they were together once again for a long time, like 4.5 years. Let me see. Sergeant Slaughter, or excuse me, number 15 is Demolition. Kind of a longevity / they held the WWF tag team titles for a long time consideration. Number 14, Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle. I mean, not only were they great in the ring, I mean, look, if you're in the main event of a match that causes a massive traffic jam in Greensboro, you're doing something right. They were the NWA Tag Team Champions for a while, and they were at the top of the card. They were spectacular in the ring. Number 13, the Samoans. Not only did they have 2 major runs in the WWF, but they had big runs in Mid-South and Georgia as well. So they were together and nonstop for about 5 years, and they showed up a little bit in Pro Wrestling USA as well. Number 12, I have Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. I've had people tell me, they should be in the Observer Hall of Fame as a tag team. And I'm like, oh, no, they were only teaming regularly for about 2.5 years. To me, that kind of disqualifies you from that. But at the same time, they were impressive. They held both the NWA and the WWF Tag Team Championships, and we all know how good they were when the bell rung. Number 11, I have Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. They teamed frequently enough, starting the fall-ish of 1984 through the end of 1985 and a little bit into 1986. Actually, they broke up on Christmas night, 1985, but they teamed up a few times after that. They had a spat on Christmas night, is what I should say. But they were legitimately a main event tag team. They drew a huge house in the Cotton Bowl for the hair match against the Von Erichs, so I give them credit for that.
This has nothing to do with anything. I have to throw this in. You were talking about the Rockers versus the Brainbusters, right?
Yeah.
Before one of their matches, I can't remember if it was with the Garden or the Nassau Coliseum, but Apter and I had dinner with Tully and Arn before that match. It just popped into my mind. I had dinner with Tully and Arn, and I believe that Arn Anderson offered me some veal. I said, "Boy, that looks good. What do you have?" And he said, "Veal. You want some?" And I went, "No, that's fine." But I don't know why this just popped into my head. It's just from all those years ago. That had to be what, 89, 88?
They left Crockett right around Columbus Day, 1988. So chances are it was 89, but it could have been 88.
Yeah. Just one of the memories that you just shoehorned out of my brain.
John, I'm on Bob Smith's website here for the Outdated Podcast, and he's already marketing Devil's Duo T-shirts. In the past 5 minutes, I just had to tell you that.
Hey, T Public, $16. Get them while they're on sale.
The Devil's Duo were those. They had that Jeff Swart and Doug Vines guy, and then they had that Mexican tag team who was twins. The Twin Devils, they call them. They also call them the Devil's Duo.
Yeah, they wrestled in L.A. in 1980, I believe.
Yes.
But anyhow, let me give you my quick next 10. At number 20, the Great North-South Connection, Adonis and Murdoch. Maybe still to this day, the best heel tag team we ever had in the WWF, perhaps. 19, the Fantastics. We've already talked about them. 18, Strike Force, Martel and Santana. It should be noted that they did have a brief run in the AWA before their more famous 1987-86 WWF run, 87 run. 17, the Briscoe Brothers, unbelievable team. I always think of Jack Briscoe as the NWA champion, but seeing some of those matches like the Starrcade 83 match and some of the WWF matches they had with Adonis and Murdoch, the Briscoe Brothers were top-notch all the way. 16, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole and Gene Anderson, who had a number of runs in Mid-Atlantic in the early 80s. 16, that put the Sheepherders and the Bushwhackers, since they both shared the same DNA. Number 14, the Fabulous Ones from Memphis. Number 13, The Rockers. Number 12, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. And at number 11, one of my personal favorites, Tully and Arn.
There you go. Nothing against the Bushwhackers. I just, let's face it, they were, they were the Curly Moe of the WWF. They were a children's act. I mean, they really were. I mean,
I told John this theory before. I think that they were the reason the midgets never got booked again because they had the Bushwhackers. Why did they need midgets when you had Bushwhackers?
That's a point because one faded when the others came in. Your timing is perfect on that.
Yep.
All right, so now we're down to the top 10. I would give you a drum roll, but I'd have to use my stomach. Anyway, I don't have a drum here, unfortunately. But number 10, I have never seen a fan reaction, and I've said this on the show with some of the Southern guys I've had on. I really mean it. No fans went nuts for a tag team like the Fabulous Ones, Deep Current and Sandline. I am telling you, they had just the women would swoon, and the men wish they were them. And they were really good in the ring, unbelievable physiques, just a good team. I remember an amazing match with them against the Sheepherders, which was just all action and all just a wild brawl that ended up in a pull apart outside the ring. I thought they were really great. Now,
was that from the '86 Crockett Cup?
No, this was
that was the Fantastics.
Yeah, that was Fantastics, right? Great, and they had a good feud. Did remember the Fantastics Sheepherders feud? That's right.
Yeah,
that's
86.
right. Yeah.
Let's just say the stories out of Memphis with the Fabulous Ones are pretty jaw-dropping. Let's just leave that one at that.
Yes, and nothing more need be said. But you know what? They made their mark, and they were super emulated to the point where they invented a fake Fabulous Ones later. Do you remember that?
That was one of the best wrestling skits of all time.
Yeah. Number 9.
If you're listening to this, find that on YouTube. New Fabulous Ones with Jimmy Hart. You will die laughing.
Mm-hmm. Great memory there. And number 9, I think I'm the only one that has these guys on a list, and all the way up to number 9. I put it to you, my friends. Go to Cage Match and type in the tag team of Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody, and you will see a domination of Japan like no one ever did. And they were superheroes. They were all over the media. I know we don't a lot of Japan result type people here, but you know what? Their influence was such an impact. I had to put them up that high. And you know what? I've seen the tapes of them. They looked absolutely unbeatable. So they're my number 9.
Well, that's the thing. If I had Hansen and Brody, if I made them eligible, they would be absolutely in my top 5. The deal is, though, I kept it to the United States. Because now, think about all of the other Japanese tag teams that I have to include, and that just turns into a bit of a cluster. And it's hard to make a comparison between what went on in All Japan and New Japan and American/Canadian wrestling.
Maybe it's my videotape trading proclivities that forced me to put them up so high because I was overly familiar with them. I don't know.
All right,
number 8, British Bulldogs. What more need be said? Their early demise was awful. I just wish they'd hung around a lot longer because they were fabulous. As was my number 7, the Hart Foundation. Number 6, the one-of-a-kind Fabulous Freebirds. I mean, Hayes and Gordy is what I have written down, and the yin and the yang, the strong and the wily. The handsome and the big man. It was just they were like perfect. Number 5, I think, is probably the most underrated team on the whole list, was the Samoans. It wasn't all that long ago. I'm flipping around, and I'm watching WWF oldies on Peacock, right? And it's a match, the Joe McHugh era, and here's the Samoans. And let me tell you, you look back at them, you just remember their visage. They were a rough, tough, mean, almost unbeatable looking team in their prime. I could see why they gave them more than one championship run and that was the era where very few teams got more than one championship in the WWF, but they did. So I give them the props. Number 4, another emulated team. How many copycat Rock and Roll Expresses were they, right? But I will say that, somehow they're still working to this day. I don't know how they're doing it. But, in their prime, they made the girls swoon. And that's, they were great in the ring, memorable feuds against virtually everybody. including number 3, Tully Blanchard and Art Anderson, a tag team where the young guys, if they're really good, get compared to them all the time. I think they're legendary. I have, maybe controversially, I have the Road Warriors at number 2 because I remember some really good matches they had, but I also remember some pretty lame matches they had, to be honest with you. Especially during the NWA time, I thought they kind of faded real quick. And to me, the best blend, most entertaining team, you had the athlete, the pretty boy, and the mama's boy, the Midnight Express. You include Condrey in there if you want to as well, but even if it's just Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton with Jim Cornette, I've never been so entertained in my whole life by a tag team. That's why they're my number 1. They entertain me every time, whether it's Jim Cornette at the podium on the 605 Superstation, or if it was in a match where, Cornette got whacked with his own the tennis racket. To me, it all just worked. They were over like crazy. Everybody hated their guts. And when they turned face, they were just as popular. They weren't the most original act, but I thought they perfected that whole manager plus team type of thing. I don't know. I have a real soft spot for the Midnight Express.
They are my favorite tag team of all time.
Really? I didn't know that.
No, Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, absolutely my favorite tag team of all time.
Wow. Okay. I feel
And
I don't feel so all alone now.
Aren't far.
Yeah, no, Condrey was great. Condrey looked like he'd just bite your head off the minute he walked in the ring. He was the mean Midnight Express guy. And everybody forgets Midnight Express was actually a faction before it was a tag team. I'm sure you know that, you guys. But, you go back to, they had several members in the beginning, but they honed it down to those 3 at the end. And boy, oh boy, what memories.
I mean, they were, like I said, they're my favorite tag team of all time. If you want to see the best Jim Cornette, get Peacock and watch Mid-South Wrestling starting right around Thanksgiving 1983 until Cornette made his final appearance there. I want to say like May 1985. I mean, this was a different Jim Cornette than he was in JCP. He wasn't funny. He was mean. I mean, if he made you laugh, it's like you almost felt bad for laughing. Like, you're laughing at something incredibly harsh that he said to poor Boyd Pierce.
Right. People bought tickets to see Cornette get smacked. There's no question in my mind.
I mean, one of the greatest angles of all time was the confrontation Jim Cornette had in 1984 with Bill Watts. I mean, it's on Peacock. I won't spoil it for you.
Right. Oh, gosh. The original. You know what? The actual TV angle that led to the original Midnight Express versus the Cornette Midnight Express with Heyman there. I don't think that ever really was the feud that it could have been. But the build up to it was classic. My God. One of the great TV moments ever on TBS.
And you know what? I knew it was coming, and that ruined it for me.
Oh,
if
really?
I had not known it was coming, I knew that Paulie was coming in with Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose, and they were going to attack Jim Cornette. They were going to attack the Midnight Express, but Jim Cornette was really going to get singled out. And it was a great angle anyway, because at the end, you're like, oh my God, they busted Jim Cornette wide open. Look at this. And this is right around the time everyone was starting to like Cornette. They hadn't really turned babyface 100% yet. And then it was still shocking, even though I know it was coming, but I wish I didn't know it was coming.
One of Cornette's greatest moments of his whole career was the next week when he was interviewed at the podium. He instantly turned face. The fans went nuts for him, and it was one of the great interviews he ever did.
It really was. He's got a giant bandage on his forehead. He's wearing a new jacket, but he's holding and showing you the white jacket covered in blood after what happened last week. What a great moment.
It really was one of my favorites of all time. And you see, it's hard to get over that kind of thing. When it's embedded in your psyche, it never leaves, Yeah,
I mean, great moments. You guys want me to start?
Please.
Okay, my number 10 was based on longevity. It is the Sheepherders / Bushwhackers. I don't think there was I know there wasn't another team that was together in January 1980 in Portland, and they were still together December 1989 as the Bushwhackers in the WWF. That cannot be overlooked. Not favorites of mine. I enjoyed their blood matches with the Fantastics. They had a couple of good ones with the Fabulous Ones, although as time has gone on, I don't enjoy them that much because, well, we've seen that before. But, given what we appreciated seeing it live as it happened, I give them credit. Number 9, I think one of the most underrated tag teams of all time. They were together forever, but we're only counting what happened after January 1st, 1980. Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. I think Greg Gagne gets a really bad rap out there. That he was terrible just because he was Vern's son. He was not terrible. And it's not like Vern went out and made him AWA champion or anything like that. He found a really good role for his kid. Their stuff, frankly, reminds me of the Rock and Roll Express. They were that good. Number 8, Kerry and Kevin Von Erich. They passed the Did They Team Enough test. They teamed a bunch of times in 1985 to keep their feud going with not Tully Blanchard, Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez, leading to about a 25,000 in attendance for the hair match of the Cotton Bowl. Number 7, Jack and Jerry Briscoe. They not only had the big run as heels in Mid-Atlantic, but they did some work as babyfaces in Mid-Atlantic too. And in 1980, they were teaming frequently in Florida. And I mean, once again, that legendary feud against Steamboat and Youngblood. Number 6, I have the British Bulldogs. Now, here's what I did. The kind of contradicting my stance on Brody and Hansen. If you were going to be ranked for what you did in the United States, then I'm going to throw on the stuff that they did in Japan. And they'd had a lot of great matches in Japan, not only before they entered the WWF, but after they left the WWF late 1988. They had good Japan matches in 1989. They did some good stuff in Calgary as well. Number 5, they had 2 separate runs as NWA Tag Team Champions, one in 1980, one in 1983. They were still teaming a lot in 1981. Of course, I'm talking about Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. Number 4, it was hard to have the Rock and Roll Express this low because the Rock and Roll Express were phenomenal. Not only were they great in the ring, they were together for 7 years of the decade, I believe. But when they first entered Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling in 1985, even when they first got there, and this went on through the end of around 1986, they would come out in the tag team, come out on television, and Rock and Roll is King would start playing by ELO, and you thought the Beatles were coming out. And that is not an exaggeration. You just heard this like high-pitched screech from the girls in the audience, and you're like, what am I looking at here? So they get extra credit for that, but I mean, they were a great tag team. Number 3, the Midnight Express moved up when I learned that I could combine the Stan Lane and Dennis Condrey Midnight Expresses. I mean, again, Lane and Eaton were my favorite tag team of all time, but I mean, Condrey and Eaton were a great tag team, and both tag teams were very different tag teams. I thought Eaton and Condrey were better in ring, but Stan Lane brought that certain charisma out of the whole thing, and it turned the Midnight Express. They really were a main event act in the NWA in 1988 and 1989 until they were accidentally booked all wrong. I'll never get over that. Number 2, the Fabulous Freebirds. They were together the entire decade. They were huge in Mid-South in 1980. Then they went on to World Class Championship Wrestling. What else need I say? Back to the WWF, not back to the WWF. They had that memorable but short WWF run. They did a lot in the AWA. Then they went back to Mid-South, which was now the UWF, and dominated the heel side of the program. It was downhill after that. Terry Gordy, by the time they went to the NWA in 1987, Terry Gordy's bread and butter was in Japan. Michael Hayes got pushed as a single for a while. The Jimmy Garvin Freebirds, they're under the Freebird umbrella, so I'll count them, but they were not my favorites. But Freebirds were great for a 10-year period. And number one, I mean, I agreed with what a lot of what Bob said about the Road Warriors. Sometimes they weren't that great in the ring, but they were just the dominant tag team of the decade. I had to give it to them.
They sold tickets.
Yes, they did. I mean, the NWA would have a War Games match in the Orange Bowl in Miami, and who's in the main event? The Road Warriors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I would never. I mean, go back to my old company. How many times were in the Hogan area were the Road Warriors in the cover of the magazines? Almost as much. It was, and they weren't even in. They were in the AWA, the NWA at that point. So no, everybody thought that they were a incredible act. You throw Paul Ellering in the mix, his brilliance on the mic. I mean, it was it for about 3 years. They really were.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really.
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry. We got to give a shout out to our friend Jamie Ward. He was there at the Vet in Philly to see Road Warrior Hawk take on Ric Flair in a really famous match that people still talk about. And I know a lot of us wanted to see Road Warrior Hawk come out with the title that night.
I was there too, Steve.
Was that John or is that Bob?
That was me. I traveled from Nashua, New Hampshire, for heaven's sake, for that
Oh
show.
my goodness!
Yeah.
Was
All
that
right,
one of the-
Steve, you're off the on deck circle and I'm heading home plate.
All right, here we go. Number 10, the High Flyers. I mean, I think most people think of them more of a 70s team, but they were together for the first half of the 80s, and they were having tons of success.
Until Brunzel left of the WWF.
Absolutely, in 85. And number 9, Demolition. If you like the Road Warriors but with better work rate, you got Demolition. Number 8, up at the Von Erichs. Von Erichs had...
I'm sorry, you got me with that one.
Yeah, the Von Erichs were unquestionably like one of the greatest babyface powers of all time. Any promotion, you name it, the Von Erichs had fan support. Without compare, they were one of the greatest teams of all time with their fan support. Number 7, I thought John had listed this team too low, the original Samoans, because that initial run in 80 with the Afonseca was just so impactful. And I think along with Peter Maivia's original run, that was the beginning of the Samoan dynasty, which still to this day is such an important part of WWE. Number 6, the Hart Foundation. Again, as I said earlier, they were around from 85 to about 91. We saw Bret Hart improve a lot in that time frame. He was a good worker from day one, but we saw him get polished, and we saw him develop into a main eventer, which he would become in the 90s. Number 5, the Fabulous Freebirds. I guess I'll use a rock and roll analogy. The Fabulous Freebirds were kind of like, they took the same kind of journey that, say, Jefferson Airplane took to become Jefferson Starship and then just Starship. They lasted that long. At the very beginning, they had all of this incredible work that people still talk about, like the early 80s Freebirds, that people still talk about it. But as you get down to the late 80s, it gets into that we built the city era of the Freebirds, and people are kind of forgetting about it at that time.
Steve, if I were a Freebird and I heard that analogy, I would be cutting myself with a blunt object right now. That was brutal.
That was also the best analogy I've ever heard. That was perfect.
They might be cutting me with a blunt object.
Yeah. No, but that was perfect. That was so right on. I'm telling you.
Thank you. So number 4, the Rock and Roll Express. You guys have said it all. I mean, the fact that these guys are still working today. I know we're talking about just the 80s, but I mean, there's something to be said for their longevity and their huge fan base. Number 3, the British Bulldogs, I think, of any team on this list, I think they had more pure talent, pure ability, but we know what happened. There are a lot of injuries. You take those kind of incredible bumps like Dynamite would like to take. Davy Boy, he was smarter and didn't put himself in such danger, but they both suffered a lot of injuries as the 80s went on, and their work definitely slowed down because they couldn't keep up that high level of intensity. Midnight Express with Jim Cornette. Again, another musical analogy, comparing them to number 1, the Road Warriors. You know, if you're talking about classic rock, I guess people usually say that the number 1 classic rock group, if you're a FM programmer, would probably be the Eagles. But I look at Midnight Express as kind of the Steely Dan, the better music, the better quality. But the Eagles have to win just on pure numbers and more sales. So Road Warriors win my number 1 slot in the top 50 tag teams of the 80s.
I have to tell my demolition story really quick.
Let's hear it.
I'm at the Worcester Centrum in 1989 for a wrestling superstar / Saturday Night Main Event taping. And I go and I take my seat. And I am sitting next to, they were nice, but they just had a weird presentation about them. There were 2 guys and a girl all decked out in demolition gear, right? I mean, like the numbers aren't adding. We need 2 guys and 2 girls. Or we need 3 guys, something like that. And, you know, like I said, they were cool. I'm like, hey, hate to break the bad news to you, but Tully and Arn are winning the titles tonight. And they're like, no, you don't know that. Who are you? And, you know, an hour later, I know.
They probably followed you out of the building, like buy us some lotto tickets or give us some stock tips.
Did you see their reaction?
Yes, I did. They were a bit taken aback by the whole scenario. That's kind of what my whole thing in the 80s was.
Wow.
John McAdam, harbinger of bad things.
Yeah. Bad news, Johnny.
Bad news, Johnny, yeah. Hey, listen, as I compiled the top 50, I will say that if you look down from 1 to 25, maybe 30, it's spot on. I think it's a real comprehensive list. I think it's actually even more comprehensive than a couple of singles lists that we had. It's great. I hope that the listeners will enjoy hearing it. And you guys, again, you brought your A games. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I have one less thing to OCD over because, I mean, until I had to send that list to you, I was constantly working on it and changing my mind. But I mean, you know, there's really not going to be that much difference between, I would say, number 30 and number 50.
Right.
You know, it's all what you prefer.
But here's the thing. If you look back, though, was the 80s the best era for tag team wrestling when you put these top teams? I mean, look, Gagne, Brenzel, the Briscoes, Youngblood, and Steamboat, 2 power teams in the Road Warriors and Demolition. Offense, Sika's just as powerful. You know, the technical skill of Arn and Tully, the Freebirds for the entertainment value, and the yin and the yang, the sweet and the sour in that team. The Fabulous Ones for the ladies, the Rockers for the girls. You know, it's just go on and on and on. And there was a lot of different flavors and a lot of talent. And this may have been the best decade for tag teams ever.
I can't even see a debate that it wasn't the best decade for tag teams. I mean, you look at the 90s and, you know, what can you say? The tag team titles were just nowhere near as important anymore. In the 70s, you would have promotions with, you know, maybe 2 regular tag teams. I mean, the WWF usually had only 2 regular tag teams and then guys who, you know, would team up on occasion. In the 80s, I want to say there were times when they had 10 tag teams. So I think it's the 80s by a mile.
But let me ask both of you guys a question before we say goodnight here. Do you think that the promotions now consider tag teams to be an afterthought?
Yes.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say that too. I mean, you know, the men still are the primary thing, but the women are a close second, and tag teams are just, it's just kind of like if you don't, maybe you need more training, you need more seasoning, we'll put you in a tag team, or we don't have a good gimmick for you, we're going to make something up. It just seems like the ready to go awesome tag team like a Wyndham and a Rotunda or a Midnight Express, you're not going to find them anywhere anymore. They're just not out there.
I mean, I agree with Steve. I mean, it was more emphasized in the 80s than any time for the most part. I mean, yeah, you had Bruno and Strongbow against the Valiants at Madison Square Garden, but that was kind of a one-time thing. I mean, we've talked on this show about, Mr. T and Hulk Hogan, were the teaming up on the main event at WrestleMania. The Von Erichs against Gino and Chris, the main event in the Cotton Bowl. The whole Greensboro thing that happened in 1983. So, and the Midnight Express against Tully and Arn were supposed to be a main event feud.
I'll leave you two with this. One of my favorite memories of tag team wrestling. It's 72 or 73. Little Bob, 12 or 13 years old, sitting in front of a black and white television. And the main event on the WWF Championship Wrestling show was Fuji and Tanaka versus Tony Garea and Haystacks Calhoun.
Wow.
For the World Tag Team Championships.
I remember Calhoun with that belt around, not his waist, it was kind of around his chest.
Yeah. But let me just bring you this. The match was the usual thing where I believe somebody tried to throw salt and missed, and Haystacks took over and pinned the guy who was trying to throw I can't remember if it was Fuji or Tanaki, but I just remember Haystacks with the pin, and Garea got up on top of the huge Haystacks with his arms in the air while the pinfall was being counted, and the place went bananas. And in one of the great TV moments I have ever seen, ever. And then there was a commercial break, and they come back, and you never saw this before or after. It's Vince McMahon surrounded by a bunch of, I'd say, high school to college age boys. And they're going, history is made here at, at the arena tonight. You guys have a good time? They went, yeah. You could feel the absolute passion of these fans when Calhoun and Garea won this belt. And this tape is lost forever. I know it is, but I am telling you, the paint was dripping off the walls, and I think it was that moment that made me the fan that stuck around for the rest of his life. I'm serious. That was such a moment for me in tag team wrestling. It was just beyond belief.
That is so smart, and I'm surprised they never did it again. Because if you're a kid watching on TV, you look up to the high school kids, you look up to the college kids, and if you see them on TV putting their stamp of approval on this product, I mean, you're going to bring that kid back.
The fans were celebrating like we won the war. You know what I'm saying? Like the end of World War II. I'm serious. The fans were celebrating it, hopping in and out of their seats, and the young fans were rushing the ring. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was joyous bedlam. And I am just so sorry that this tape doesn't exist, because I'd pay $50. I'm serious. I'd pay $50 to see this again. I really would. It was just one of the greatest TV moments in wrestling of my whole life. I'm just sorry I guess that it's lost to the ages, because it was amazing.
So much is. It's sad.
Mm-hmm. Either you guys have a moment like that with a tag team match that just really... What's your favorite moment with a tag? We'll leave with that. Steve and Joe, just real quick. You have a favorite moment from a tag team?
Well, you startled my memory, triggered my memory again with what you just said. There was a match from my youth that I can remember like it was yesterday. I was watching it. In fact, I was watching it with my grandmother at her house. It was Haystacks Calhoun and a young Kevin Sullivan going against the heel super team of Ivan Koloff and superstar Billy Graham. And these two were confounding Superstar and Koloff, and I'm sure it ended on a schmaz of some sort, but you could tell that when those moments in the match when Calhoun dominated these guys, and even Sullivan did for a little bit, the fans in Hamburg or Allentown were so joyous and so happy. And I think part of that whole tag team thing is that those belts were on the TV a lot. You didn't really see Bruno or Backlund defend the title. So it was kind of like maybe the title that meant more to the fans just because they could see it more often. And John, what do you think about that?
I mean, did it mean more to the tag team titles mean more to me? I mean, I know they always changed hands on TV, and they changed hands a lot more frequently than the singles title. But I always considered the singles title the number one championship.
Sure.
That didn't sway me.
Right.
Mhm.
All right. My number one memory tag team from the 80s. I was at the Boston Garden, I want to say June of 1982. And the Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito were the tag team champions. The Strongbows had come back, or Chief Jay Strongbow had come back to the WWF, bringing along his brother, Jules. And like these guys were red hot when they first started. They really were. And they had just come on, they had just returned to TV, like I want to say 4, 5, 6 weeks earlier. So we're getting the title match really early. So they announced the match. We're ready to go. Everyone's red hot. I mentioned earlier that Fuji and Saito got more heat than any tag team I've ever seen. Now you've got the Strongbows who are red hot. They're Jay is back. He's a legend. The fans are pumped for this match. Mr. Fuji throws salt at Chief Jay Strongbow, throws salt at Jules Strongbow, and pins him in like 20 seconds. It was the closest I have ever seen to the Boston Garden rioting. I mean, the place went nuts. People were throwing, it was like the bash at the beach where people were throwing stuff at Hulk Hogan multiplied by about 5. And someone throws a Coke can into the ring. But you have to understand, it was really hard to smuggle stuff into the Boston Garden on wrestling night. It really was. They would pat you down for real. If the girl had a purse with her, they would go into the purse and search. So I'm like, okay, this guy could have brought a lot of stuff in, but he brings a can of Coke, and Saito is unfazed. He picks up the can of Coke and starts bashing Chief Jay Strongbow in the head with it. It's not like, okay, we better get these guys cooled down. It's like, no, we're busy. And then the Strongbows come back, and the fans start cheering, and I think it was Chief Jay pinned Fuji in like 2 or 3 minutes, and they did not tell us coming in that it was a 2 out of 3 fall match. I know that they didn't, and that's why the fans acted like the way they did. Then I want to say 2 months later, they have that match on TV with the exact same a sequence where Fuji throws salt at both the Strongbows and he gets a 20-second pin. I did not know I had never heard the term exposing the business, but man, they exposed the business.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, we have a couple of wrestling lifers here. Make that 3 if you add me to the team here.
I think you're a wrestling lifer, sir.
Yeah, I can't shake it. It's like even the years when I was involved, I always watched it, and I continue to watch it. I'll go home and watch Raw on Netflix when we're done here. So it's like I can't stop. And you know what? Neither can Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, a legendary wrestling podcast on the Arcadian Vanguard Network featuring these two guys. And John, anything you want to say about that? Where can people find you guys? The floor is yours to hype yourself.
Yes. If you just search the word Stick to Wrestling, all kinds of links to listen to the podcast come up. We've been at it for about 7 years now. It'll be 7 years in June. We're up to about 356 episodes. I just real simple. If you like me on this show, please check out Stick to Wrestling. If you like Steve on this show, I'm on 100% of the time. And like I said earlier, Steve is on about 1/2 to 1/3 of more than 1/3 of the time, like 1/2 to about 60% of the time. So please check it out if you like. And, you talk about being a wrestling lifer. Steve, it's usually about an hour show. I try to keep it around there, but it takes more than an hour to prep for that show. So wrestling lifer, here we are.
Yep. And Steve, thank you also for being here. Anything you want to hype?
Well, I just want to say that next year will be John and I's 50th anniversary as fans. I know, Bob, you even go back a little bit longer than we do, but 1976 was our first year. So this coming year will be our 50th year, and I'm sure on the podcast we'll do something really special to acknowledge that, and we'll continue to look back at the 80s and even the 70s as well.
That's awesome. And listen, folks, they won't say, but I will. Do not miss Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. It's one of the best out there. It's on the Arcadian Vanguard network, so you know it's quality, and the ratings prove it. They're always a top 50 podcasts in a world where there are more than 900 podcasts just about wrestling. And I'm not even making that up. That's the truth. These guys continue to rule the roost when it comes to nostalgia, and your success is well deserved because it's an amazing show.
Well, Bob, thank you. I'm actually very flattered. And I mean, just so everyone knows, it is the #1 wrestling podcast out there, because you can't count Steve Austin's podcast against Stick to Wrestling. That's not fair. You can't count Jim Ross's podcast. So when you eliminate all of the podcasts that are in front of me, we're #1.
There you go. Hey, I'm #1 too. I'm the #1 among wrestling fans with lumbago. So it's like, and other old school maladies. It's like, I'm for you. It's just the way it goes. Anyway, we got Steve Gennarelli. We got John McAdam. Guys, you're the best. Come back soon, please. The welcome mat is always outside my door for you guys. I mean,
anytime, man.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, you've heard us all jibber jabbering, right? So let's get right on with it, get right to it. The 1980s Tag Team Top 50. We'll take it backwards, see if you agree with our picks, and here we go. This was done after compiling the 3 wrestling experts. I put that in quotes. Number 50, the Moondogs. 3-way tie at number 47. David and Kevin Von Erich, Ted DiBiase and Steve Williams, Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. 3-way tie at number 44. Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff, Big Boss Man and Akeem, Roddy Piper and Bob Orton Jr. Number 43, Sting and Lex Luger. Number 41 was a tie. The Rougeau Brothers, Tonga Kid and Haku. Number 40, Sid Vicious and Dan Spivey. Number 39, Ken Patera and Jerry Blackwell. Number 38, Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. Number 37, Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez. Number 36, Warlord and Barbarian. Number 35, The Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. Number 34, Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody. Number 30, another 3-way tie. Tony Garea and Rick Martel, Ole and Gene Anderson, and Kerry and Kevin Von Erich. Number 29, Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson. Number 28, Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. Number 27, Steve Williams and Mike Rotunda. Number 26, Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito. Number 25, Ole Anderson and Stan Hansen. Number 24, King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd. Number 23, Tito Santana and Rick Martel. Number 22, Ivan and Nikita Koloff. Number 21, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. Number 19 is a tie, Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle, Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. Number 17, now here's a tie for you, Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis, and Jesse Ventura and Dick Murdoch. Number 16, the Fantastics. Number 15, the Rockers or the Midnight Rockers. Number 14, the Fabulous Ones. Number 12 was a tie, the Hart Foundation and the Sheepherders or Bushwhackers. Number 11, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. And here's our top 10 of the greatest tag teams in the 1980s. Number 10, Jack and Jerry Briscoe. Number 9, Rick Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. Number 8, Demolition. Number 7, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. Number 6, Afa and Sika, the Samoans. Number 5, the British Bulldogs. Number 4, the Freebirds. Number 3, the Rock and Roll Express. Number 2, the Midnight Express. And number 1, the Road Warriors. I told you I'm old. Before we get into tonight's good nights, I just want to let you know that as I'm reading the list after 4 hours of editing, I realized that number 17, I read it wrong. Here's who tied at number 17. Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis, and Adrian Adonis and Jesse Ventura. I accidentally misread the second tag team. What do you want from me, a rubber biscuit? Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Words cannot describe how much I admire everything about Brian Last's Arcadian Vanguard podcast network. He knows how to separate the wheat from the chaff and get the very, very best talent for all of his programs. Now, we all know about the 2 shows he does with Jim Cornette. But Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam is pretty ginchy, too. And I'm a fan of that show. These guys always surprise me, John and Steve do. And I've become really good friends with both of them. And I want to publicly thank them for their friendship these last couple of years. It has been eye-opening, exciting, fun. And we always have a good time when we get together. And I learn from these guys every time I talk to them. It's been really cool. I can say the same thing about the Wrestler Weekly guys. Hats off to you two, Scotty and Mike. All the people at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network with Ray Russell, of which I'm a member of at present. And it's been going along swimmingly. And I've had several of their personalities on the show. Dave Dynasty is a cool dude. Terry Sullivan and Dave Brzezinski. I mean, I could go on with the list of people that I have met through this podcast. It's made it all worthwhile. And like I always say, there's that secondary thing where, Craig Peters and I get together frequently now, which is amazing to me. It's absolutely amazing to me after all these years. And I'm hoping to see Bill Apter in May. In any event, it's been cool beans, baby. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. All of our episodes are there. I will never Patreon you for them. They are for you. Check them out, all right there. If you do not want to use a podcast app, as many of our older fans have expressed, go to the website and just click. Also, if you want to find all the podcast apps we're on, it's really easy. I formulated this in my mind. It's the easiest way to find us. I'm always offering information how to find us, even though you're already here. But in case you just bumped into this thing and you want to listen to it somewhere else, type in Outdated Wrestling Bob Smith. It will come up in a variety of places. There's also a list on the website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. Click where it says About, and you will see all of them come up. And there's even more than are listed there. We're on YouTube, too. So wherever you want to hear us, we are there. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singing with BB King, baby. You better believe it. You can also find me on Blue Sky, Outdated Bob. I'm Blue Sky. By the way, I should say outdated_Bob. That would help. Outdated_Bob. I'm not going to say what's on my mind right now. This is a really funny, dirty joke. I'm not going to say it. Anyway, I should say it. Oh, Bob, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Anyway, find me on Instagram. Find me on Threads. Find me on Blue Sky. And find me on X. I'm still on X. Anyway, I'm going to put a bow on this one. It's been a long show, but I think it's been an exciting show. Thanks again to Joe, John, and Steve. You're helping make the Outdated Wrestling Hour the show I've always wanted it to be. So, until I see you next time, my name is Bob Smith. In the words of Ringo Starr, circa, let's say, I think this is from 1967. What? I don't get to sing on the new album? Gotcha.